Folks, welcome to In Between the Pages with James Lott Jr. I'm James Lott Jr. here at JLJ Media, and I'm telling you, we go in between the pages, and this one we're going in between because there's a lot to talk about that was written on these pages. The book's called Riot Diet, a one man's radical ride through America in chaos. I just want to tell you, this book is, I said so, it's a page turner. Like, seriously, first you'll go, okay, oh, it's a nice big book, got it. You start reading it, and you want to keep seeing what happens next, and then what happens next, and then what happens next, and then what happens. Literally, I endorse this book completely, and you get a point of view that you don't see very often, and you'll recognize some of the names in the book and situations that were brought up. I want you to help me welcome journalist and author, new author. This was his first book.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to that title.
You're
and journalist is a pejorative these days. So, I mean, I was a video director at the time, but I guess now that I've written something, I'm gonna have to just live with it.
everybody's an author. I know, I get it, but still, you are an author.
There we go. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Congratulations, first of all. Congratulations. Birthing a book is not easy. What made you decide to actually? You said you were doing video, almost like that, capturing the world that way. What made you decide you want to tell your story in book form?
Well, I can tell you the exact moment. It was on January 6, 2021 at about 9:30 p.m. I got home from all the mail. And my coworker, Sagnik, who was also my roommate at the time, I got home from all of the madness, and we were sitting on the couch just watching, obviously, wall-to-wall coverage of the event. And Sagnik just looked over at me, and he's got an Indian accent, and he just said, I guess that's the ending to your book. And I had considered maybe writing a book. I hadn't written anything since I was a history major in college, and every paper that I wrote, whether it was 2 pages or 40 pages, was written the night before it was due. So I never considered, I always liked to write, but I was running the video program at Daily Caller, and I was always focused on video.
Yeah.
But there's something about a book where you have to think about what you're saying. It's a lot different than speaking. It's a lot different than recording a video. And I had like 4,000 videos from on the ground, and I just had such a wealth of information and evidence of what happened that I basically decided, well, I guess I got to write a book. I didn't realize that it was going to be 2 books until it started getting into it. And these people who were so disaffected with the system that they went out into the streets, and many of them ended up resorting to violence, and that descent into chaos on both sides of the political spectrum. Thought to myself, I have to do it right. And as I was putting a pen to paper, it was difficult to make sense of all the chaos and to actually generate some meaning from it. And, if I had known how much work it was going to be at the very beginning, I might not have done it. But if I'm going to do it, I had to do it right, because as far as people who were on the ground who saw that scope of mayhem on both sides of the political spectrum, I'm like one of 3 or 4 people in the entire country who was at places like Kenosha and January 6th. And, I really thought of it, not when I was shopping it around to publishers and agents. They all told me that I had to pick a side if I wanted to sell books in this current environment. They also told me Trump wasn't running again, or that he wouldn't make it through the primaries if he did, because of January 6th. And I think in media, people have a tendency to think what they want to happen is what's going to happen. But I, set forth on this mission of not politicizing it so much as just describing my personal experience. And after 2 years, I'm just finished the second book, and that's going through the editing process right now. But I think 20 years from now, somebody will be able to pick up this book and get a feeling for like, hey, can you tell us about that time in 2020 when the entire country went completely crazy? And so my goal was not to necessarily appeal to like the political tribes of the time, but to write a primary source that describes what it was like, what it felt like to be there, and who was out there, what they said, what they were wearing, and what went down, for better or worse.
Yeah, most of it. We read the book. You could tell you're reporting on it. You're reporting on it. You're telling your point of view. I didn't feel like there was any sides in it. I didn't feel sides, but I could see them telling you got to pick a side.
Yeah.
Which you don't have to.
Yeah, I started my own publishing company, so I'm the boss.
Yeah, but it's your story, and I again, a lot of us, just the lay people out here who just wonder if companies are trying to make people do certain things. You just basically kind of, said, yeah, they do sometimes just to sell, market. It's now it's the sides. It's this side and that side. You're like, but my story isn't about that,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. And yours, it's about sides, but not you picking a side.
Yes, exactly. To pass judgment so much as it is to document what took place and just give people a feeling for what it was like.
Yeah, that's what you do in video, right? That's what you also do when you're doing video
Exactly. Yeah.
documentary, right?
Yeah, and that was our mission from the beginning when we were out on the ground was, everybody was who was out there was either on this side or that side. And my boss, Jeffrey Ingersoll, who's a former Marine, just put it very simply. He was like, just tell us what you see, give us your objective observations. And if you stray into tribalism, I know you'll get more retweets and you'll get a bigger platform, but you'll get fired. So that was our mission from the very beginning. And I got Anthony Swafford, who wrote Jarhead.
Yes.
My cousin got drunk with him at a writing conference 20 years ago. And he put me in touch with Swafford, and he was the first person to tell me that he believed in what I was doing. All these other people said, like people don't write like this anymore. And I looked to, the Joan Didions and the Hunter S. Thompsons, the gonzo journalists of the past, for how they confronted their moment of civil unrest. And I had these people who were 60 something years old telling me no one writes like this anymore. And I'm like, well, you guys wrote like this when you had your moment of change, and I'm going to do what I want. So once I got Swafford on board, I had the courage to just start my own publishing company and do it on my own.
I know, I love it. I love it. One of the things actually, we're going to get into the all the dramatics and stuff, but I do want to ask you, I like this line of questioning right now, discussion. What have you learned since?
Hmm.
This is a two-part question.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot through the process of writing the book itself. And I think the primary thing that I learned was that the people who are out on the ground, when you really dig into the videos and you see the pain in their eyes and you hear them talking about why they're out there, those people were in that moment used as cannon fodder by the media, who was basically all of these events that took place were framed based upon the narrative of this side or that side. And I just saw commonalities between both sides of the political spectrum being really disillusioned with the way that things are going in the country. And I think I really learned a lot about the human side of what it is to be an American, and, how it is that we can figure this out and move forward from it. And I think the process of writing it actually helped me come to peace with a lot of the anger that I had surrounding this company.
As you're through this process, do you have a different view on protesting, or is it basically about the same? What is your view on protesting? Not all
Well, I
protesting
think
to riots, all riots to, it's that whole thing. But just curious for
I
you
do. Yeah,
personally.
I definitely do, because what I did in the book, as you know now after reading it, there's a lot of history in there as well. And so going through previous moments of previous paradigm shifts in our politics, the parties tend to ebb and flow
Yes.
as far as who they represent, who they claim to represent, what their platforms are. And also, like just a great example is the Stonewall riots, which happened in New York, and I talk a lot about in the New York chapter. Just looking back on that and reflecting on how those moments were chaotic at the time, how they were portrayed by the press, and then how they're viewed now as part of history. And so it forced me to take more of a perspective of, okay, I'm kind of acting more of as a historian here, looking at this stuff that I experienced rather than really letting the, I guess, opinions of the time affect the way that I told the story.
Did you consider yourself a guerrilla journalist while you were doing all the video stuff?
Yeah, I did. I definitely did, because just by nature of where I was working at the time, I mean, in the book, I take people through my own, I traversed across the political spectrum just in my professional life. And as America changed, I think it really started even before the Trump era, with the end of the Obama years. But by 2016, by 2017, workplace became typecast. And, oh, if you work here, then you're this. But I was running, a video outlet. And for the viewers who don't know, I was working at the Daily Caller, which was founded by Tucker Carlson. And at the time that I started the job, Tucker was he was on the Fox weekend, and he didn't have the primetime show until right when I started. And so I didn't really know how the toothpaste was going to come out of the tube as I was working at this anti-establishment conservative news outlet during the Trump years. But I was running a video operation, so a lot of the people who were on my team weren't by no means conservative, even by the modern definition, whatever that even means today.
Yeah.
But once all the poop hit the fan, I don't know if I can swear on here, but
what falls out is fine.
Yeah, but going through all that and seeing the way that different people in the media kind of try to put me in a box, that really informed me on how our discourse functions today and how it is that people at home interpret what's going on the ground, and kind of the two different echo chambers that we have now of basically, people can see an event like January 6th take place and have two completely different understandings of what's taking place based on what their social media feed shows them. And what I found after writing is that it was always, whether it was the BLM stuff or the MAGA stuff, it was always a combination of the two narratives. So there were peaceful protesters who had all good intentions who went out there, and then it was always a smaller group of scurrilous agitators who had the sole intention of agitating police and getting them to come out and use whatever munitions it was they were using in whatever location we were in. And gathered from all that it was this weird phenomenon where you have to ask yourself the question of, like, my job was to be a fly on the wall and just sit there as quietly as I could, recording with my camera and trying to get people to trust me, to tell me why they're there, but also to what extent are these people actually doing what they're doing because they know that cameras are rolling? Is this, what would they be doing in an environment where there weren't, cell phone technology and where there weren't these cameras rolling? And I don't, really know where the line is between whether or not people are just acting for the cameras or whether or not, they would have done this regardless. If a protest happens in a forest and there's no one there to see it, does it make a sound?
And it's funny. I've protested over the years for things. I mean, especially, well, not during the pandemic time, but I did back in the day for things. There is, and you start to smell it in the air, so to speak. You can feel it in the air. Electricity is there when something's about to turn violent. I've been a couple times where I've been in protests where nothing ever happened. But I've been in protests where you start to feel the turn. Can you talk about that in the book?
Yeah.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I call it the Lord of the Flies effect, which is obviously another famous book. But people at home, the so-called armchair quarterbacks, it's really easy for them to watch these kind of things through the pixels on a screen. But what I was trying to get across in the book is the difference between watching it on a screen and experiencing it in real life. And there is a totally different part of our modern brains that we neglect, that we almost feel doesn't even exist. This lizard brain that goes crazy when the pepper spray comes out and you see one of your fellow protesters get billy clubbed or sprayed with pepper spray. You get pepper spray in your eyes, you get tear gas, and it turns on this different part of your brain that's extremely primal. And when that part of your brain gets turned on, there's no thinking going on. It's pure circuitry.
It is. I've been pepper sprayed before. It hurts. It hurts. Yeah. I mean, it's like nothing I've ever felt before. You did too.
Yeah, I'm about 150 pepper sprays deep, and I can confirm that.
No, when I was reading this thing, that's why I thought I'd make you laugh a little bit, because I've read you talk about all this stuff. But I'm saying I pepper sprayed once, and that was all. That's all I needed. I was like, okay, I get it. This shit hurts. This is not fun. I get it, and you're right. Your brain does it. Just something sets off where the anger, you can't believe it just happened to you. It's a lot, and you've had it happen over and over again. I mean, like.
Couldn't stop once I got in there, as we had a mission, and I thought it was all going to end after the election. Obviously, I was naive in thinking that, but once we started, the mission was so simple: just go out there and ask people why they're there and record whatever comes next.
Yeah.
we had to finish the job. So I had to go back out there by the time
Yeah.
we started.
Well, pepper spray is the least of things you've been through. We'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that in a second. But I want you to just tell the viewers and listeners, this also be listening, people listening to this, name some of the places that you in the last 5 years, 4 years that you have been. It's included in the book. People, you'll know some of these names and cities, and just name a few to them, please.
Yeah. So it kicked off in DC on the Memorial Day weekend after George Floyd was killed. And we were in Washington, DC areas. And by the time I got there on Monday morning for Trump's now infamous Bible photo op, it was very clear to us that, the corporate media was standing outside of these protest zones, talking in platitudes with their big
Yes.
fancy cameras. And we
Yes.
were just like, okay, kids, we're just going to go in there with our cell phones and we're just going to subtly record what's going on and just relay it back to the viewers at home without commentary.
Yeah, which I appreciate, of course. We just
Yeah,
wanted.
so I guess DC. Then we went to Seattle, the Chaz, as it was called. CHOP was
Yep.
another name for it, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. That was like a
Yeah.
block area that the police commissioner Carmen Best basically ceded to this protest. And the first thing they did was put armed guards and not walls but barriers at the border of the Chaz and basically created their own little dominion on Seattle's Capitol Hill. And then we went to Portland and then Kenosha. And then I went to a Proud Boys rally in September back in Portland. I went to the border. I went to Rudy Giuliani's apartment to pick up the Hunter Biden laptop. I don't want to give too much away of the
I know.
second
I
day.
know. Just a few, just so
And,
we get an idea
and,
that
and the
you're out.
election,
Yeah.
stop the steals in
Yeah.
DC, and then January 6th and Joe Biden's inauguration.
So, folks, I wanted to mention. I want you guys to know he hits points that you guys have either heard of these names or heard these situations, or maybe have your own opinions on them. He's going to take you there and show you his opinion. His POV of what
Mhm.
he went through during covering each of those things. Not opinion, but his POV.
There's some opinion, but I think, I also come from a place like I moved to DC in 2008 and I was knocking on doors for Obama in Virginia. And I was an extremely idealistic 18-year-old studying Arabic at Georgetown. And Obama had promised to pull all the troops out of the Middle East in an op-ed before he was elected in the summer of 2008. And I thought, I was going to be on the forefront of this new Middle East where, we'd pull all the troops out and we'd reinvent the way that America projects its power abroad. And I would say over the course of my time in college, over Obama's first term, I became somewhat disillusioned with the hope and change that he promised and what actually ended up happening. That was also the financial crisis of 2008. And we could, go back and forth about what Obama did to alleviate the pain that average Americans suffered from after that crisis. But he certainly bailed out the banks and certainly didn't pull all the troops out of the Middle East. And so I guess, my own personal journey of coming to terms with the way that politics affect our daily lives and the way that campaign promises are made and either upheld or not so much. By the time Trump came around in 2016, I knew that he was going to win after Bernie Sanders got forced out of the race because he was running on not the same platform as Obama, but he was running on a change platform. And people after Obama's two terms, I think they were still hungry for change. And certainly Hillary Clinton, I don't think represented that. And, I think the most recent 2024 election was similar in that way.
I agree. I totally agree with that. All that, yes. But I just want folks to say you were involved in some major things, and just because I know, I wish I had taught you forever. Kenosha. It's there's so many things that whole situation polarized a whole. Like, that's the others didn't too, but this seriously, like,
Yeah.
now we had a face, Mr. Rittenhouse. We had a whole thing going on there. But you were actually, you were literally, like literally, you were there.
Mm-hmm.
So in between the pages, folks, he goes into the whole thing. I just want to kind of ask you this question
Mm-hmm.
out of this is having a bullet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you look back on that situation, just on that part of it,
Hmm.
because later you had a whole there's trials, all this stuff. I mean, folks, he really got embroiled in a lot of stuff. He had several sides not liking him. It was a whole crazy thing.
Nobody liked me because yeah, I was good for the defense during that trial in some ways, and I was also bad for the defense because I was also named as a victim, even though without giving too much away, I didn't ask to be named a victim. I just told the police that I looked down. I looked down the moment the shots went off because I felt something go past my legs. And it wasn't until the trial actually that FBI Cessna was flying over with infrared footage, and that video actually shows the heat signature of the bullet skipping off the ground in front of me. So, like the conservatives were saying, "Oh, he's lying. This guy, the bullet didn't go past him," and then the left was saying, "Oh, he's lying about Joseph Rosenbaum lunging for the weapon, and he was holding his camera like he was filming. He must have been filming. He deleted the footage to protect Kyle Rittenhouse." And the reality of the situation was that I was on the phone with my coworker right when the chase started, and I took a photo of the ground. And I was actually horrified. I told police in the hospital when they arrived that I had recorded the shooting. And I went into my phone and my stomach dropped when I realized that I hadn't, and I would have to tell what I saw rather than just show it.
And as a video person, who's a videographer who documents, they must have sucked also. You're like, I don't have
Yeah,
it. I don't have it.
that's I interviewed Kyle 13 minutes before the shooting, and I mean that's one of the I guess catch 22s of being in these situations is like the way that our news functions is if it bleeds it leads. It's the classic phrase, and if bad stuff happens, then that's when people pay attention to your coverage, and so when bad stuff happens, that's when you make money. And there's a certain amount of guilt that I had writing this book in realizing, and I'm very open about that in the story is like what made money, what didn't, and like how these people, these actual human beings were kind of just turned into caricatures for the sake of satisfying a political narrative.
And you're a part of that. I mean, you're literally a part of that. I mean, like you're
Exactly. Yeah.
embroiled. You're embroiled in that.
Yeah. I was a riot pornographer.
You're right. You're right. Yes, exactly. I like that term. That's exactly. But that's what I'm saying. Reading the book and just seeing, like I said, talking about turning the page, going, okay, you're talking about this part, and then the prosecution over here, and then BLM is not liking you, and then you were like, and you didn't ask for any of it.
Yeah, and it made no difference, whether it was the Proud Boys who were beating somebody up. For those who don't know, that's a far right group who, they're very pro Trump, or whether it was the left, the BLM protesters who are acting violently, or if it was the cops beating up on them. Our job wasn't to say, oh well, these our audience likes these guys, so we're not going to publish this footage. And without giving it away, in the Chaz, we filmed a very violent beatdown that the Proud Boys, 5 of them, did against one guy. And we were confronted with the decision of like, should we publish this footage? These guys are on parole. Like, we're going to become the enemy of these guys who are scary dudes. A lot of them were armed. They were armed. A couple of them were armed in Seattle. And, they're not the kind of people that you want to get on their bad side, but it was just our job. And so it was like, yeah, we're publishing the footage just like we would if it was somebody who, from the left who, our audience might view less favorably.
Well, I was saying that's your whole point. Is that you are trying to document moments of history, moments that are happening. That's just your job. Your job is that's what I'm doing, folks. It's not about editing stuff out or saying no, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to make sure the bent's this way. That's what most folks who do this kind of guerrilla stuff, who are doing video documentary. Yes, some have their slants, but most of the
Hmm.
time you're just trying to catch it. You're trying to catch the moment.
Hmm.
Don't you want the full moment? Because you want the full moment, don't you?
Exactly. And that's a lot of what's talked about in the book is like what we filmed, what the bigger context was of the full video, and my experience interviewing these people, and then how those little snippets, like tiny little fractions of those conversations, were then grabbed by this side or that side and then used kind of to prove a partisan point. And so I'm just trying to tell the deeper, bigger story of these human beings who are actually out there.
I always say that's the better any kind. I mean, I'm a huge documentary fan, of course, and stuff. To me, the best ones are the ones that just give you the say, here's the story.
Mhm.
You could have whatever conclusions you want, but here's the story. Here's the truth that I saw it at that moment.
Yeah. And I
That's
think
what,
it's really hard. It's really hard in this day and age to basically take that perspective, because if you, like I said, if you do satisfy this audience or that audience, you're going to get more retweets, you're going to get more exposure if you call them BLM terrorists or, insurrectionists. But the fact of the matter is the more that everybody participates in satisfying those two echo chambers, I guess the more that you stand out for not doing it. And that was one of the difficulties that I had in writing the book, was like, well, I could just, go this way or that way, and more people would buy the book and I'd be able to feed my family. But I can't do that in good conscience, because that's not what my role is in this situation.
And I admire you for that, because I think some of us who claim to want to present the truth as we see it, and as we see it, whether it's me doing an interview or you on the ground, I feel like my friends and family would know that's not me if I changed up. Like if you changed up all of a sudden, they might know that doesn't sound like him. Like his MO has always been this. So I'm glad you have a conscience in there somewhere.
And Anthony Swafford really helped me find my own voice in the form of writing and make it sound like I have friends, close friends who have read it, and they're like, "Yo, it sounds like you." And it took a while. It really was hard, because you kind of want to sound smart, or you want to sound righteous, but as the readers will learn as they get through the book, I certainly don't feign away from the mistakes that I made while I was out there, and the, kind of the ways in which my personal anger at the time affected my decisions. And I think ultimately the thesis there is that when those situations happened, it was my family and my coworkers who cared about me who kind of dragged me out of that anger, and had me see the bigger picture.
Yeah. When you finish the book and you look back at the book, do you feel like still happened to you, or does it feel like you're reading it and it happened to somebody else? Like, how's it feel?
Yeah. That's my mom reading it. She was like my very first editor. She was pretty mad when she read it. She was like, I can't believe, I didn't know the extent to which, how stupid all this stuff was and how dangerous it was.
Yes.
But, looking back, and that's part of what I try to get at in the book, is that your memory is a strange thing. And there are ways in which, like with the Kenosha shooting specifically, I told myself that I stepped out of the way the moment that he fired those shots. And I told the police that too. So it wasn't like I was just saying that because it sounded cool. I was saying that because my mind, it was a fraction of a moment from when the shots went off to when I stepped away. But when I saw the footage from other angles, I realized that I stepped right after the shots were fired. And so your memory has a way of reimagining what actually happened.
And folks at home, I want you to know there are some graphic parts. I want you to know in there. Basically, more because he's describing stuff. So I just want you guys to know that there are a few in there. And was that a hard or easy decision to do?
Tell the story, I had to really tell the story. And I think if I, censored the question is like, where do you draw the line?
Right.
And so if I'm going to censor, this word or that word that's unsavory, or this detail or that detail that's unsavory, it's a slippery slope as far as, um, you know, that then becomes me kind of rewriting what actually happened by virtue of the fact that I omit certain details just because I want it to be savory to the public at home.
Yes. Riot Diet is the book. Richie, I'm glad you're still here. I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you're well. I'm glad you're emotionally and physically got through that whole book time period.
Mhm.
Um, and I want to see more work from you. And I admire you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good. And I know because you went to folks when you read it, you'll be saying the same thing. I always want to say to you, thank you for your service. Oh, because we did go through a lot for the
Yeah,
sake
it
of
was a
journalism.
lot. But the book really, it did help me a lot in coming to terms with all that. And people are like, "Oh, did you go to therapy?" And I think, just not only writing the book, but also sharing it with my family and friends and hearing what they had to say was, I think, a way of processing it because you're right. Like you look back and you're like, was that even I can't believe that was real. And you look at the video and you're like, oh yeah, I can't believe it. But I guess reality is stranger than fiction in a lot of ways these days.
Yes, that's where we'll end this story. I can't get into that story right now. That's a whole nother show we'd have to have.
Yeah.
Yes, Riot Diet is out now. You can go to Amazon for sure and get it. Do you have a
Yep.
website or anything you want to tell people about, or any kind of social media?
Yeah, pigeonpress.com is the publishing company that I started. It's not a peacock. I used to work at NBC. That's a cocky, flightless bird. It's not a penguin, which is also flightless. The pigeon used to be a messenger pigeon. You'd attach the message from the streets
Yes.
and you send it directly to the reader. And so that's kind of the approach that I have is like no corporate interference. I'm not just going to write something that, will, sell more and, appeal to this market or that market. It just was what it was. And, the reader can decide for themselves after they read it.
I like that. I like that. I like the analogy. It's pigeons. You always use pigeons for messaging.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Peacocks are showy. That's what they do.
Oh, it's a useless bird.
I love it. Thank you, Richie, for being with you today. And he'll be back on again later when his next book comes out. We'll talk about that another
Yeah,
time.
for
But
sure.
you have to come back. You're welcome on anytime. I'm James Lott Jr. Of course, we love books. Reading is fun. Reading is great. Reading is educational. Reading is transformative. Support writers, support authors, support reading, support books. We don't ban books on this today. We don't do that kind of stuff. Make sure that, all kinds of books from all sides should be presented to the world.
Yeah, it's good. Mine would be the first one to get banned too. So
It
I'm
would.
glad.
It would. I know. That's why I said that. I know it would. That's why I said that. I was like, we don't ban, but no, we tell all sides of all the stories. That's fine. That's what we do. That's what we support here at JLJ Media. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, James.